आज का भारत सिर्फ आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा, भारत खुद को नेक्स्ट लेवल पर ले जा रहा है.
Together with my friend Prime Minister Modi, who I was pleased to see again last night, we took on our bilateral relationship and raised it to its highest level ever.
We need new answers. That's why we are coming to India.
And as a citizen of Nepal, India's closest neighbor, I feel a deep sense of pride and optimism seeing this stride.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ruby Barlow and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at our top headlines today. President Donald Trump says the United States was having good talks with Iran and there was a chance of a deal over their conflict, but has warned that US strikes would resume if the negotiations failed to deliver. Washington abruptly suspended a 2-week campaign of airstrikes on Iran over the weekend in the latest strategic U-turn in the 5-month-old conflict. However, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei says messages were still being passed between the sides through mediators and Iran had not forsaken diplomacy, but reports that it requested negotiations were fabricated. Tehran also says it remains in control of the Strait of Hormuz, which Trump has demanded vessels be able to pass through freely. Iran's Houthi allies in Yemen say they had targeted the east-west pipeline transport sites linking eastern Saudi Arabia to the critical Red Sea oil export hub of Yanbu in retaliation for Saudi drone incursions. Saudi Arabia has responded with airstrikes on what it said were Houthi facilities in Hodeidah port, saying it would protect shipping. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has landed in Washington ahead of his White House meeting with US President Donald Trump today. Netanyahu is slated to attend a memorial service for the late pro-Israel Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. French police detained a man on Monday after he attacked 3 women with knives before bystanders pinned him to the ground, and an off-duty police officer detained him, Interior Minister Laurent Nunez has told reporters. In the incident near Porte de Clichy, the man attacked 3 women aged 19, 24 and 36 with 2 kitchen knives, severely wounding 2 of them. Firefighters try to take advantage of more favourable weather conditions to subdue massive wildfires threatening the French city and tourist region of Bordeaux and a number of sites in neighbouring Spain. Another heatwave is expected to hit both countries later this week. So far, authorities have evacuated about 220,000 people in France, while in Spain, around 100,000 have been told to leave their homes or seek shelter. The world risks a resurgence of the HIV epidemic after global funding fell by nearly a fifth last year, the UN body fighting AIDS has said. Funding fell 18% to $7.3 billion in 2025, the lowest in nearly 2 decades, with Washington previously accounting for 75% of all international HIV funding before Trump's return to the White House in 2025. And in Haiti, the CEP Electoral Council on Monday has scheduled the first presidential elections in a decade for a December event with a runoff in February, after plans to hold the vote in August with a December runoff were postponed over security concerns. The country has not held elections since 2016. The last president, Jovenel Moise, was assassinated in 2021 after delaying a vote for security reasons. To our top story today, Iran has ruled out the possibility of reaching an agreement with the United States under pressure, declaring it will never accept a deal imposed through threats or military coercion. The statement comes amid renewed diplomatic efforts to ease tensions following weeks of heightened confrontation in the Gulf. Tehran also described the Strait of Hormuz as the pinnacle of its power, underscoring the strategic importance it places on the vital maritime choke point through which nearly a fifth of the world's oil supplies pass. Iranian officials said control over the waterway remains central to the country's national security and regional influence. The remarks come as US President Donald Trump confirmed that Washington is engaged in intensive negotiations with Iran, while warning that the United States remains prepared to resume very strong military action if diplomacy fails. Reports suggest mediation efforts led by Oman, with support from several regional partners, have delayed planned US strikes to allow more time for negotiations. Despite ongoing diplomatic contacts, Iran's latest comments signal that major differences remain, with both sides maintaining firm positions as talks continue over the future Strait of Hormuz and Tehran's nuclear regime. We are now being joined by Fawad Azidi, an associate professor at the University of Tehran, joining us live from Tehran. Mr. Azidi, thank you very much for joining with us today. Of course, we are discussing the statement coming from Iran that has ruled out the possibility of reaching an agreement with the United States under pressure. We have seen this pause in attacks from the United States just over the last couple of days. Previously, there was almost 2 weeks of consecutive strikes. Now, do you see these latest events as a signal that both parties have returned to the negotiating table for good?
We don't know. We have to see whether the United States is really interested in reaching an agreement, or they are pausing, resting, reorganizing, and planning for the next attack. The United States has bombed the negotiations table 3 times. Once in June last year, they attacked Iran in the middle of negotiations. Again in February, they attacked Iran in the middle of negotiations. This month, they were supposed to negotiate for 60 days under the Memorandum of Understanding, and the Americans started bombing Iran before the 30th day. So you have this disagreement within the US government. Some people realize that this is a failed policy. They are looking for an exit strategy. And there are others associated with Netanyahu that want to continue the war because they do America, instead of doing America first, they're doing Israel first. They're worried about Netanyahu's election prospects in October. They want him to win, and they want to provide opportunities, war opportunities for him, so he can win his elections and continue his political career. So we have to wait and see what the Americans decide to do, which wing in the White House is going to be successful in going forward. What Iran is saying is international law. Under international law, if you reach an agreement under pressure, that agreement has no legal validity. And what Iran is saying is that they're not going to do anything while the other side is threatening to kill more Iranians and engage in war crimes, attacking civilian infrastructure, hospitals, bridges, power grids. These are international war crimes. And what Iran is saying is that they're not going to accept that type of pressure. And as we have seen, Iranian military has been quite capable of creating serious cost to the other side to make sure that they go back to the negotiations table instead of bombing negotiations tables.
Professor Azadi, now there is of course some major differences from both parties in relation to these negotiations. Of course, some of these major differences include the nuclear program in Iran, the status of the Strait of Hormuz. How do you think that they can bridge these differences in diplomacy, indeed if this path through diplomacy does continue?
That was the Memorandum of Understanding that the United States first signed, and then they changed their mind and they started attacking Iran again. Under that MOU, Iran was supposed to accept major serious limitations on Iran's nuclear program. That was a way out of that issue. And under that MOU, the future of the Strait of Hormuz was supposed to be decided by Iran and Oman, two coastal states. That is international law. The U.S. is not a coastal state to the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. is a coastal state to Gulf of Mexico. They are 11,000 kilometers away. They have no rights. And we don't live in the 16th century. This is what the Portuguese did in the 16th century, basically trying to take over the Strait of Hormuz. And they failed also. Iranians managed to kick Portuguese out of the Strait of Hormuz. So this is how this is going to go forward. Iran is not going to let the United States control the Strait of Hormuz. They have no rights there. The reason MOU was destroyed was because the Americans wanted to create this American corridor in the Strait of Hormuz. That didn't happen. It's not going to happen. Iran is going to make sure that the U.S. does not control the Persian Gulf, because the U.S. wants to create this hegemony so they could put pressure on countries like China, India, Russia, BRICS countries. They think that by controlling the Strait of Hormuz, they will have leverage on countries that they don't have leverage today. Next time there is some trade dispute between United States and India, if they are in control of the Strait of Hormuz, they would put pressure on Indian government. Otherwise, they would reduce the amount of oil that Indians can get from the Strait of Hormuz. And so Iran is fighting for Iran. Iran is fighting for independent countries, making sure that the United States doesn't become a bully here. They can bully other countries, but not in this part of the world.
Professor Izzati, thank you very much for joining with us today. A pleasure to have you on the broadcast. Air defense forces in Russia intercepted a massive wave of drones heading toward the Moscow area overnight. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin has confirmed that more than 390 unmanned drones were detected flying in the direction of the Moscow region between late Monday night and early Tuesday morning. Most of the incoming drones were neutralized by distant approaches by air defense systems, with at least 81 drones destroyed in close proximity to the capital city itself. Moscow Region Governor Andrei Vorobyov reported that dozens of additional drones were intercepted across multiple districts, including Domodedovo and Kolomna. Despite interceptions, several strikes and falling debris caused physical damage on the ground. Chekhov Mayor Mikhail Sabakin confirmed that emergency services quickly responded to the affected residential and industrial locations. No casualties or fatalities have been reported at this time. Air defense forces across the Moscow region remain on high alert, while first responders and emergency crews work to secure impact sites and assess detailed damage. We're now joined by Colonel Sanjeet Sirohi, an international relations and defense expert, live from New Delhi. Colonel Sirohi, thanks very much for your time today and for joining us to discuss this topic. Now, air defense forces in Russia have intercepted a massive wave of drones. Moscow mayor has said that there were 390 unmanned drones detected flying in the direction of Moscow. Are we seeing this war between Ukraine and Russia perhaps increase in magnitude, increase in rhythm? What's your assessment of the situation in Europe right now?
Thank you, Ruby. Thank you very much for having me on your channel and discussing something very important and latest. As far as the drone attack by the Ukrainians is concerned, on 18 July, they had fired about 370 drones toward Moscow. Then again on 20 July, 400 drones were targeting Moscow industrial and logistic facilities. And what Ukraine is doing is, now the ground forces are as it is where they are. There is not much of fighting going on the ground, but the fighting is going on in air, where the drones and missiles are being fired from both sides. And basically the targets, as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, their targets are military targets, energy sectors, and supply logistic to disrupt infrastructure of Russia, where Russia is facing a oil crisis, and as a result of that, instead of exporting, they have started importing. So I think both sides are trying to neutralize each other through air by striking through missiles and drones. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, they are using more of drones because they are less expensive. One drone costs about $20,000, whereas one missile cost about $1 million to $400 million. So in this, nowadays the war has become very, very different from what it was earlier. Even the military power, they cannot defeat the not so great military power. As a result of that, since last 5 years, we have seen that there is a fighting going on between Ukraine and Russia, but Russia is still not able to achieve its objective. And the same is the case with Iran and America. So I think these drones have played a very, very important role and significant role in changing the total battle scenario and changing the total outcome of any war. Ruby.
Colonel Sirohi, we are of course also seeing the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, in the United States today. He is in attendance for the memorial service for the late Senator Lindsey Graham, who was a keen ally of Ukraine. Do you think we might be seeing perhaps an increased support effort from the United States towards the Ukrainian side in the short or medium-term future?
Well, Ruby, I don't think at this point Americans will be able to support Ukraine because as it is, they are totally involved in Iran war, and not only involved in Iran war, they are facing difficulties because if you see their missiles and other military assets are concerned, they are depleting day by day, and they have not been able to replenish that, and that is one reason why there has been pause by the Americans while they were striking Iranians every day for last 13, 14 days. So I think the basic reason they have stopped this thing is because of the critical deficiency of all the military assets as far as which are being used in Iran-America war. So I don't think at this stage Americans will be able to support much. But yes, European countries will be able to support because now war between Russia and Ukraine is shifting and creating more problems for Russia than for Ukraine. So I think that is this is the right time for the European nations to support Ukraine and give more funds and more equipment so that they are able to withstand any further attack from Russia, and Ukrainians are able to destroy more military energy and infrastructure targets in Russia. Ruby.
Colonel Sirohi, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks very much for your time today. We now turn to Europe, where the severe wildfire crisis across Western Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron has warned that the country is facing an unprecedented emergency, stating that the weeks ahead will remain difficult as exceptional blazes continue to scorch the nation. While visiting operational response centres in Bordeaux, Macron noted that a major fire in the Gironde department has stabilised overnight, though conditions remain intense and have forced hundreds of thousands of evacuations. The French government held an emergency crisis meeting as emergency crews race against time ahead of a forecasted new heatwave. Meanwhile, emergency services in Spain are heavily deployed in the eastern Castellón province, where a fast-moving wildfire continues to rage alongside major blazes near Madrid. Tens of thousands of residents have been displaced across both nations as authorities battle to contain the flames under mounting extreme weather risks. Let's listen in to what the French president has said about the current state of fires in France.
Au moment où je vous parle, le feu est fixé, ce qui est une bonne nouvelle dans les Landes, mais on continue de se battre. Il a été stabilisé, comme on dit, mais il continue d'être virulent. Il faut être extrêmement prudent pour les prochaines heures et les prochains jours dans notre département ici de Gironde. Donc, le feu n'a pas gagné de terrain aujourd'hui. Donc les 24 dernières heures, on voit bien que tout le travail qui a été fait par nos moyens aériens et par nos hommes et nos femmes sur le terrain, nos colonnes de feu qui ont vraiment contenu, a été efficace. Donc bravo à eux. Je crois qu'on a aussi amélioré les choses par les pare-feux qui ont été finalisés. Donc on est en bien meilleure situation qu'il y a 24 heures. Maintenant, je reste prudent, à la fois sur la partie sud et la partie est, pour plusieurs raisons. La chaleur va remonter. Le vent est là. Et donc, il faut être humble.
We are now being joined by Samuel Marcus, who is a climate science and emergency management researcher and PhD candidate at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. Samuel, thanks very much for joining with us today to discuss these wildfires currently going on in Europe. Now, can you speak to some of the contributing factors to the particular magnitude and ferocity of these fires that we're currently seeing across Spain and France?
Ruby, good afternoon, and thank you for having me on the show. Very happy to discuss some of these wildfires, just horrifying scenes coming out of Europe at the moment. And you're right that the magnitude of these fires is unprecedented at the moment. And what we're seeing, and as fires encroach on urban areas, including Bordeaux, it's extremely important to talk about. In terms of the magnitude, there's a lot of factors that went into the condition of these wildfires. If we go back to the winter and the spring in Europe have been quite favourable for wildfires, with a good amount of rainfall that's led to an increased load of vegetation. So that vegetation that's grown and grown over winter and spring throughout Europe has then suddenly come into a summer that was very, very fast to onset. And we saw two significant heat waves, one in May, one later in June. You'll remember some headlines from then. These heat waves led to the really, really rapid desiccation of vegetation. So vegetation died and dried out very quickly. Soil also dried out very, very quickly, leading to these flash drought conditions. So all of a sudden you've got lots and lots of vegetation that suddenly has no moisture, which is really good preconditioning for fire conditions. The other issue we're having with these heat waves is the extremely hot weather combined with windy weather and dry conditions. All of these conditions perfectly set up the environment for fires to take off and just need an ignition source. Ignition sources can come from a lot of different areas, but the challenges that we're seeing at the moment are lots and lots of fires occurring at the same time, which can then move very, very quickly and often outpace firefighting resources. And when there are lots of fires in different places, they're spatially compounding, it becomes very, very hard to get ahead of them and prepare for them.
Samuel, what would some of the challenges on the ground for some of the emergency management staff be facing? You mentioned firefighting resources. What else would be the firefighters on the ground be facing with?
Yeah, really good question, Ruby. And I think it's an important point to talk about the resourcing, and there is only a finite amount of firefighters, aircraft, fire trucks, and supporting staff and managers that are available to respond to these kinds of emergencies. And when we're seeing fires of a significant size in a lot of different locations, it becomes very quick to be stretched out. It becomes fast for our resources to be stretched. Staying ahead of those fast-moving fires as well. I mentioned before how vegetation is very, very dry and the fuel load is increased. As a result of that, the fires are moving quickly. They're pushed along by the wind, and it's hard to keep track and keep ahead of them, meaning that firefighters can only really attack these fires from the sides, the flanks, or from behind, and risk safety going in front of that fire front. Another challenge is actually the safety of those emergency services staff. That includes not being in front of the fires as they're moving through, but it also includes things like bushfire smoke. And as you mentioned, another heatwave forecast for later this week. Working in the heat is extremely dangerous for all people, let alone the firefighters who are required to try and stop this catastrophe. The other challenge that we see is Europe has a system in place for resource sharing, the civil protection mechanism, which allows for resources to be shared between different countries. So we've seen Turkey, Portugal, Greece and Italy sending some resources to Spain and France, providing some kind of assistance. But that becomes hard when we have two countries, or potentially more in the future, being affected at the same time, right now being Spain and France.
Indeed, a very complex situation. Samuel, thanks very much for joining with us today. Now, turning to developments out of France, where authorities in Paris have launched an investigation following a brutal knife attack near the Porte de Clichy metro station in the northwestern part of the capital. French Interior Minister Laurent Nunez confirmed that 3 women, aged 19, 24 and 36, were targeted by a suspect armed with 2 kitchen knives. 2 of the victims sustained severe critical injuries and remain hospitalised. The 31-year-old male suspect was quickly apprehended at the scene after being swiftly pinned down by brave bystanders and officially detained by an off-duty police officer. While initial reports indicate the suspect made incoherent statements upon arrest and may suffer from psychiatric disorders, officials stress that a definitive motive remains unknown. France's National Anti-Terrorist Prosecutor's Office is closely monitoring the case to determine whether formal terrorism charges are warranted. Tech entrepreneur and prominent biohacker Brian Johnson has sparked intense debate across social media after claiming he has essentially cloned himself as a newborn. However, clarifying the science behind the headlines, expertise highlight that Johnson did not create a human copy. Instead, he has utilized induced pluripotent stem cell technology, applying Yamanaka factors to extracted adult blood cells to reset their epigenetic age. By reprogramming these mature cells back into an embryonic-like pluripotent state, the method allows them to develop into specialized tissues inside a laboratory petri dish. Johnson argues that this advancement represents a pioneering frontier in regenerative medicine, suggesting such laboratory-grown cells could eventually help test therapies, grow organs and reverse aging processes, even though medical scientists caution that widespread clinical application remains far off. And with that, that's all we've got time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates coming to you from around the world.